Would you like to play some football?
And welcome to another edition in early December, mid-December, college football playoff edition of the Gridiron the Gospel, a faith in college football podcast. I'm George Schroeder, joined by Dean and Sarah. And man, there's so much to talk about, Dean. The football is largely, the regular season's over, the conference title games are over. We had our first bowl game of all things on Saturday, December 13th. We're recording this on Monday morning, December 15th. That was a little early for a bowl game. We had the Heisman ceremony, and we had a coach getting fired, and it came out of nowhere for most of us. Although, in the industry, I think there had been some rumblings of some issues, personal issues with Michigan's Sherrone Moore, or former Michigan coach Sherrone Moore. So I think we probably should just start right there. First of all, are you ready for Christmas? Let me just ask you that. Are you ready for Christmas? You are one of those procrastinators.
Well, I was until you talked about the season being over and were not very gentle in your approach of how you said it. You're a little too direct on that. So it's a process.
Denial is a river in Egypt, Dean, is how I'm taking this. I mean,
Let me tell you what, I love the Army-Navy game, but that's a sign that it's over. So it was sad.
And I do want to talk about the Army-Navy game too, by the way, because it is the best. But yeah, sure.
Oh, we're all in Christmas, and we're big Christmas people here. You know, we are decorating and going seeing lights and having all the fun. And church is a great time of year. It's not a favorite time of year for church. It's just fun, and there's opportunity for the good news, and it's just really great. So I'm just really thankful for it. And the boys and I are going to College Station for Miami, Texas A&M. So that's part of our Christmas celebration.
Absolutely, and that's going to be fun too. And so you're talking about Miami at Texas A&M first round playoff game on Saturday the 20th. That'll be a ton of fun. And look, Kyle Field is a tremendous venue for college football, especially when the Aggies are good. And this bunch of Aggies is obviously very good. And so you guys will have a tremendous time, even though you're going as Canes fans.
Yeah, and we dodge a little bit of a bullet not having a night game. So it's a noon Eastern kick. It's still going to be rowdy, but Kyle Field at night, I've been once before with my good friend Philip Bethencourt, where Miami played there a few years ago, and it's a special place. Like if you're one of those like kind of college football, I want to visit all as many stadiums as possible kind of fan, Kyle Field should be right up there.
No question. And this will be as big a game as they ever played there, right? That's true of the first time any of these schools host a playoff game. First of all, it's the latest game probably in every single case that any of them have ever hosted on their campus. And then you add in the fact that it's a playoff, and obviously we didn't used to have those. So, man, that'll be fun. You guys are going to have a great time. We can talk more about that later, and that's the kind of thing we can talk about after the fact. But Sherrone Moore gets fired for cause by Michigan last week.
Yeah.
And the news quickly comes out. And even as the news is coming out about why he got fired, which is an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate, apparently he had an affair with, and obviously there's more going on there when you have an affair with a subordinate, someone that you had given a giant raise to within the athletic department. Then it turned out that in real time, we heard he had been arrested, that he had apparently allegedly forced his way into this person's apartment and was threatening to kill himself, had pulled out some butter knives, the police report says, and was holding them to his throat. And, this person had apparently ruined his life by reporting the relationship. And this is all in the police report. It's all allegations, right? It's not been proven, and was saying he would kill himself. And a stunning, terrible fall from grace and tragedy on multiple levels. But where would you start just to even begin to discuss the Sherrone Moore issue?
I mean, one, it's just sad. I mean, his poor wife and his children. I mean, and now this woman who I believe was his executive assistant, is what people said. I mean, her life's been put on blast now because of the choices she made too, which is just really, really sad. And it just shows us the reality of sin, and also how many people in the real world does that happen far too often too, that we don't ever hear about. Because they're not celebrities. Like, this is something that happens all across the country regularly. Maybe not to the extent of getting a butter knife and going in a house, but I mean, in terms of the relationship that destroys a family, It's just all around sad. And then there's, we're obviously a football podcast as well, and there's the football dynamics. He was one of those hires that no one was really sure about. Anytime you hire the interim, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, is this, he was interim when Harbaugh was suspended, had some big wins, obviously, beat Ohio State a couple times, which is very significant in Michigan world. And I hate to be a cynic, but I know college football fairly well. I know I'm just a fan. I'm not in the industry, but beat Ohio State, and we might not know about this. And
No,
I think that's
yeah,
reality. We might not be having this conversation if they beat Ohio State.
no, I hear you. And that is, I think, the cynic in each college football fan coming out. Whether or not that's the case, we won't ever know. But I agree with you that it is tremendously sad. And just, I hate every minute of it. I hate every minute of it, just on every level. So it's one of those things where you can't even begin to. There's so many rabbit trails you can go down with this, Dean. Just too many. Your focus is right. There are consequences for actions we take, and every level, and they don't just affect us.
That are
They
far-reaching.
affect the other person, and then they affect your family, and they affect all sorts of things and all sorts of people in damaging ways. And that may be my chief takeaway from this: is sin destroys.
It does.
That's not the football end of this podcast, but it's true. And we saw it acted out in real time last week with the Michigan coach and now the former Michigan coach. Sin destroys.
Yeah, one day he's playing Ohio State, and a few days later, we're seeing a mugshot. He's getting arraigned via video. Just awful. Just what can happen, and all of this. Again, we don't know the inner workings of what's going on with him mentally. We don't, but we do know that he made this decision to pursue this relationship or relationships, whatever all it's been during his tenure there, and it has been catastrophic. It's because of choices of giving into sin and temptation and whatever his desires were, his lusts, and all happened as a result of this. And now his power, because of he could probably get away with a lot in Ann Arbor because of who he is, and that's the position, maybe that whole state. The Michigan football coach,
Right.
more
Right.
powerful governor, in some circles, and just like that, this Christmas time, think about that. Not that it's ever okay, but think about his kids and his wife, and it's just awful.
All of it. And you're right. And I'm glad you noted this, but the young woman too, right? Her family, all sorts of
Yeah,
things, all
based
sorts of
on
people
choices.
affected and destroyed. And right, there are choices been made all over the place in this, in both cases. But our sin affects so many more than just ourselves, and we don't think about that in the moment typically, and you ought to.
Far-reaching.
So, just a terrible thing. And let me just encourage those of you who are followers of Christ, man, would you pray for the people involved in this? Probably most of our listeners, none of our listeners maybe know them. I'd never met Sherrone Moore. I had not been in and around the Michigan athletic department much since leaving, obviously, USA Today, but really just hadn't been around it a lot, didn't know him.
And he's a
Would you?
Sooner, right? Isn't he a Sooner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you just pray for everyone involved? Because the ultimate need here, as long as we're going to go into the faith side of this podcast, which, look, y'all, we compartmentalize this podcast, but we don't compartmentalize our lives. Our faith with Christ infuses every portion of our lives where it should. So I don't want to do that. But now I've lost my train of thought, Dean. But we should
you're
be
right.
praying
You're all
for
prayer.
them. They need Christ. That's where I was going.
And
People
also,
need Jesus.
Treeline Church is one of our Salt Network churches, and is in Ann Arbor, just several years old, a very young church, but what an opportunity they have as well, when maybe people are willing to have a conversation about morality and things such as that. So we lift up the churches in that area too, because when local things happen, there's an opportunity. When
That's
everyone,
right.
yeah, there really is. So of course, Ann Arbor's a tough place spiritually, and what a need for great churches like Treeline and others who are there during this time, especially.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. So, look, there's no great way to segue to this, but going back to the football end of things, where does that leave Michigan football? That's
Ooh.
the question here. The immediate thought was, oh, well, Kalen DeBoer, who was interested in the gig when Harbaugh was rumored to be leaving, and eventually he did leave, and they promoted Sherrone Moore, who'd done a good job as an interim coach when Jim Harbaugh was suspended. But at that point, Kalen DeBoer was at Washington, and now he's at Alabama. And
Different.
obviously, there are all sorts of issues and thoughts, well, maybe he's not Nick Saban. You know why? He's not Nick Saban. But that's a pretty good place to be, Alabama. And they're in the playoff, playing Oklahoma on Friday the 19th, this Friday night. And he put out a statement. It took several days, but he put out a statement that just basically said, I'm really happy here and got no plans to leave Tuscaloosa and all those kinds of things. And I understand those are worth the little electrons it takes to hit send on those things. I get it. But typically, you don't do that if you're in the mix. So where do they go, assuming it's not Kalen DeBoer, if you're Michigan?
Yeah, I don't think it's DeBoer because of timing. Yeah, and now if this would have been a month ago, I wouldn't be surprised if he jumped on it. Honestly,
Or if they hadn't made the playoffs, maybe.
yeah, I know Alabama fans can't fully accept that someone would leave, but I'm telling you that was a reality. I think that of it being possible. So him, Jed Fish had another good year at Washington. He has Michigan ties. I think his name will come up. So I think Jed Fish, DeBoer, I think he's out. I don't think they can go inside that Harbaugh era tree because it is some of the scandals and just some of the stuff. So Jesse Minter's name, obviously would come up, but can you do that right now? Can you have someone from that era? I just don't know. You have to kind of move on from that time. Will Harbaugh be involved from a distance? Does he still have power there? I think you have to kind of ask that question. So, where do you rank Michigan in jobs? I mean, is it a top 5 job because of the prestige of it?
I think so. I mean, first of all, it's the winningest place in college football, right? So I absolutely think it's a top 5 job. But in the Big Ten, it's one of the 2 schools that essentially does whatever it wants in the Big Ten and sort of holds sway in the Big Ten, which puts you, at the top of college football's upper tiers. So I would just say, yeah, it's one of the top 5 jobs. It's a plum. It's a jewel. It's got a national championship recently, right? A couple years ago with Jim Harbaugh. You're at a platform now where you can, you've got the resources to spend all of the money that we've talked about on this podcast to put together rosters year after year after year to retain players year after year after year. I think I don't think there's any question it's a top 5 job in college football. I don't,
Yeah,
if we were start ranking them.
Blue blood as it gets, right? It's just blue blood of blue bloods.
So is
I think
Alabama.
yeah, sure. And I asked that question because if you're that level, I think you can kind of go get who you want, even with bad timing, right? Because there's buyouts and there's always ways out of contracts and things such as that. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was somebody that we would not even have on our radar because we think they're locked in where they are. But then all of a sudden Michigan comes, like, I think I'm going to go there. Also, the other side of that is there could be an NFL guy. I could see Michigan making an NFL move and going to get a coach that has NFL ties.
Yeah.
I don't know who that is, but I think that's possible. But they can get anyone they want. It's Michigan, right? Like the only coach that's fully out of play is what, Ryan Day? Is that the only one?
Yeah, I don't think they're hiring Ryan Day.
Yeah,
but
I think it's the only person that's not a possibility.
basically anybody else. And Jed Fish is the name you're going to hear a lot. And Washington completed its season by winning something called the Bucked Up LA Bowl, which makes me feel like we shouldn't say it on this podcast.
You can slip there.
Sadly, the uncle of them all, the Bucked Up LA Bowl, is going away. That was the last one. But Washington just won the LA Bowl, beating Boise State on Saturday, the 13th, which is, a week earlier than we traditionally see sort of the minor bowl games begin. But so Washington is free. Its season's over. And I don't know that a minor bowl game was going to stop anybody from pursuing any of these coaches anyway. But Jed Fish makes a lot of sense. He was with Jim Harbaugh early in his tenure. That's where I actually met him. And then has bounced around. He's been in the NFL and obviously did a very good job at Arizona. He's got Washington playing well. He took over at Washington, left Arizona for there after DeBoer left Washington for Alabama. It's like we're playing a game here. I think Jed Fish makes a lot of sense. Now, whether it will be him or not, who knows? There are a lot of guys they can go after, and I appreciate the fact that you said that because that's exactly right. How about Brian Kelly?
Yeah, his name's popped in my head a little bit, and also Jed's won everywhere he's been. He has a lot of experience. He was OC for Al Golden for a hot minute at Miami, but he did a great job at Arizona. But Brian Kelly, that's an interesting name. I can't see, again, major Michigan ties, right? He
Yeah.
was at Grand Valley. He was at Central Michigan. So he's a Michigan guy, not a Michigan guy in terms of Bo Schembechler way he says Michigan guy, but the state of Michigan guy. So that's interesting to me. I don't know if the fan base and the boosters and the alumni would be excited about that though. He's just not a very popular guy right now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I just know he's available. But again, you don't have to go get somebody who's available. He's in his mid 60s and his tenure at LSU didn't work. I think a lot of that was fit, but he doesn't have a he's not like warm and fuzzy and oh my goodness, this is exactly the guy that someone should go after, right? So it's hard to sort of see that. I don't know who they'll get. I know they'll take some big swings and somebody they want. That's how this is going to work. So we'll see. Look, plenty. We could talk about that a lot. I think let's just go ahead and talk a couple other things here on this podcast here, sort of this little interlude before we get our prelude, I guess, before we get to the playoff. The Heisman was awarded. People thought it was going to be a very close race. When the voting totals were released, it was clear that it was not, in fact, a close race. Fernando Mendoza, the Indiana quarterback, won. Um, the finalists included Diego Pavia and Jeremiah Love. So it was not surprised. Julian Sayin from Ohio State. I did not think he would win. I was absolutely not surprised that Fernando Mendoza won, and I thought he was a very deserving winner based on what he's done on the field. But I just want to say this: the way he comes across in his post-game interviews and then in his acceptance speech was tremendous. That was amazing. Great acceptance speech. And guys will pull the acceptance speeches out of their inner pockets from their jackets, and they'll read them, and some of them will do a great job and others won't. Some of the content of some of the speeches is better than others. And look, it's a big moment, the biggest moment that they've had basically in their lives at that point. So I don't ever well, that was a terrible speech. But I'm telling you, that was a great one. And he didn't pull a paper out of his jacket pocket. He had worked on it. And the only thing that kept him from delivering it flawlessly into the camera were his emotions. And he hit all the right notes, and it appeared to be very honest, very genuine.
Genuine's the word. Genuine's the word. Yeah. And another word that popped in my mind was grateful. Like he really was a grateful guy. I mean, he was, if you sign with Cal out of Miami, like you're from South Florida and you sign with Cal, it's still granted, it is a FBS position. Like it's a big deal, right? Obviously, like to get recruited by an FBS school, like you're the top of the top. But if you're from South Florida and you end up at Cal, it means you weren't that highly recruited for a high level South Florida person. So to go from there to he almost beat Cam Ward last year late at night. And to go from that to transferring to Indiana, and people knew who he was mainly because that game against Miami. And to go win the Heisman Trophy when people thought maybe the Indiana was a flash in the pan, it was maybe a one-year thing. It was kind of a cute story. To go 12-0 to win that miraculous game at Penn State, to beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. I mean, this guy, again, the Heisman, oftentimes, it wasn't this last year with Travis Hunter, but oftentimes it goes to the quarterback or the running back on the best team, right? So a lot of this was that award, but I'm okay with that because it's kind of an MVP award, right? And if you're the general on the team, then that's oftentimes it's going to be that way for you. So I thought it was great. The Heisman's lost a little bit of its luster. I remember growing up, there was nothing bigger than the Heisman Trophy. I mean, it was like the biggest deal in the world. Who was going to win it? He became this mega star. It was a huge deal. It was talked about 24/7. It's still the Heisman Trophy. It still matters. Obviously, we're talking about it right now. But even though it's lost its luster a little bit in its prestige and culture, it's still neat to see someone like him get the award. I think it's great. The way he thanked his mom was awesome. To see how much his teammates loved him. I saw all the video afterwards where his linemen met him in the back room. They all kind of bull rushed him, and started jumping and hugging, and they were genuinely excited. So that just says a lot about the person too. You can tell that by what your teammates think of you, what your coaches think of you. Those things matter. He's about. You can tell he's a team. Yeah, we don't know him. We just know what we know from TV. But he seems like he's a team guy. He seems like it's not about his brand, which is often the case nowadays. And it was just cool to see.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and you're right to caution that we don't know these guys, and perhaps none of our listeners do either. But based on what we've seen, what it feels like you can glean is, I love that you mentioned gratitude, because that is what I really picked up on too. The other thing that's interesting is if, in fact, he is a team guy, beloved by his teammates and everything else, you got to keep in mind the new world of college football is he's only been there for less than a year. I don't know when he transferred in from Cal. I don't know if he started in January and went through spring practice or what, but he's continuing the trend of recent Heisman winners. I think the last 4, but it's like 6 of the last 8 have transferred in, and that's just the new world of college football, which is fine. But the idea that he's sort of formed a bond with his teammates is really cool.
Yeah.
He made a ton of plays. You mentioned that he was the best player, best team theory. That's exactly right. That's kind of what this award typically ends up being. But he made some critical plays for Indiana to be unbeaten and ranked number 1, top seed in
Quarterback
college football
matters.
playoff. Yeah.
Quarterback
It wasn't
so much.
despite him. It was because of him that they're there. And look, it was because of everybody else is what he would tell you too, which I love. So I thought he was a deserving winner. I loved this. I loved the speech. It makes him easy to root for, which makes me want to root for the Hoosiers even more. That what's funny is it's Indiana University, but they feel a little bit, even though they're ranked number 1 and everything else, they feel a little bit like Hickory High, which for those of you watching on YouTube, that's the hat Dean has on, is a Hickory High souvenir cap there from
Right.
visiting the gym, I think.
Jimmy Chitwood, I'll make it.
I'll make it. Love that. So, all right, who would you have voted for if you had a ballot? I mean, at one point I did have a ballot. It was a lot of fun. Obviously not in the business, not covering college football. I don't have one. You vote for 3. You've only got 3 slots. So who would you have voted for? And they're not necessarily the 4 finalists, but how would you have gone, Dean?
So I think I would have gone with Rodriguez from Texas Tech on my ballot. Not maybe the winner, but I think he'd have been on my top 4.
So linebacker, he finished 5th, I think, in the voting and did not get invited. Yeah.
Now, Ruben Bain doesn't have the stats because he gets double teamed, but his disrupting ability will never show up. I mean, the havoc he creates apart from staff, but he's phenomenal. But not him. But I think he should have been in the conversation for the top 10 more because of just what he brings to the table.
Mm-hmm.
So, but definitely Mendoza. I think he's the quarterback on the best team. I would not have had Sayin on there because you can't be the second best player or the second best quarterback in your conference.
Well, he's throwing to these crazy talents who maybe should have been on there, right?
Yeah,
and they were in the top 10 voting too.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean he's not a good quarterback, but just that I'm just like, if you're not the player of the year in your own conference, I'm not going to put you in the Heisman. I think
I hear you.
I think Love's the real deal. Yeah, I like him a lot. And okay, so you're going to ask me who I think is the best player in college football. I'd probably say Love. But the question is, what is the Heisman Trophy? What does it actually go to? Like, is it the best player or is it kind of the MVP, which is different? So for MVP award, if it's the MVP, I'm totally fine with Mendoza and I'd have voted for him. And I definitely would have Pavia. Oh my gosh. You take Pavia out of the equation. I know that Lee is great and Jerry Kill's great, but you take Pavia out of the equation at Vanderbilt. I mean, it's a different story. I think they're still competitive and they're still much better than old Vanderbilt, but they're going to have a drop off next year without him, is my prediction. I don't think that's crazy to say.
I'm a sucker for the defensive players, and so I probably would have gone with Rodriguez, who is a really good player. He's the leader of Texas Tech's really good defense, the reason they're in the playoff and have a first-round bye. And so I might have gone with him, not as my number 1, but number 3 on my ballot. Probably would have gone with Pavia number 2 for the same reasons, although I want to get to him in just half a second. And then I would have had Mendoza number 1 this year. And there are some other guys I would have thought about probably, but that's how I would have done it.
I'm good with that totally. Now question.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think our listeners are interested in kind of some of your history, and what you bring to the table for our conversation and your past with college football. How many times have you voted, like an official voter for the Heisman, that it wasn't the winner?
Oh, I don't know.
Who were a couple people you voted? Who were a couple people you voted for that did not win? Are you allowed to share that all these years later?
Yeah, I voted for Adrian Peterson, the Oklahoma running back, and he did not win. I don't remember which year that was, but one of the USC guys won that year, and they were deserving. But I thought Adrian Peterson was, and obviously this was borne out in the NFL, was as good a player as I ever saw. Now, here's the thing. When I say that, I shouldn't be using that as justification for a college football's best player, because it doesn't matter what you do in the NFL. It shouldn't matter
It doesn't at
what
all.
you're going to do in the NFL as someone is considering you for who's the best player this season, the most
It's
impactful player. But I voted for Adrian Peterson once and feel good about it. And I'm trying to think if that was Matt Leinart who won that year. I can't remember. But there's one example. I voted for Darren McFadden one year, and I
Look at
guess that's
you,
the year.
a lifelong Arkansas fan who lived in Norman, Oklahoma, and your two guys you voted for, McFadden and look at you confirming media bias for us
Yeah,
here.
I think there's a lot of that, and I don't think that's the reason. McFadden was unbelievably
He
good.
was unbelievable. Absolutely.
So not, and I, that's not. Look, there's a bunch of deserving winners, and there's some that maybe shouldn't. But I will tell you this: I do think guys when you see someone more often, and I didn't see Darren McFadden all the time, but when you see someone more often, I think it's a whole lot easier for you to sort of go, oh, that's clearly the guy. And that's why it's always interesting to watch the breakdown of voting when the race is close. This one wasn't. They have several different regions and that they put voters in to try to distribute the 915 or 16 voting slots that they have. And so different regions, the West and the Southeast and whatever. It's always interesting to see who won each block. And a lot of times you'll find a region, even in today's world of college football, it's less than it used to be, a region that has lined up behind one guy because they've seen and read and watched this guy a lot more than the others. And it's always interesting when you have two from the same region to see how that breaks down too. But yeah, I mean, I've certainly voted for some that didn't win. A lot of times it feels pretty obvious, and it's always fun when it's not. But a lot of times it feels pretty obvious, and I like it when it's a great story. I think Mendoza is. So, all right, real quick on that, Diego Pavia is a great story himself. He's more than a great story. He's the reason, the biggest catalyst in Vanderbilt's rise over these last few years. And he obviously transferred in and has played tremendously well for them. Didn't react very well and issued apology later after not winning the Heisman, which tells me a couple things. One, I think he really thought he was going to win it.
Yeah.
And so I don't think he was really prepared to handle it well when he didn't. I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but had a social media post that basically blasted with an expletive Heisman voters for not voting for him.
Yeah.
There was another, I don't know that this was him posting it, another thing with him partying with some folks that basically that someone was holding a sign up that blasted with an expletive Indiana, which is obviously where Mendoza is the quarterback. And he came back and apologized for it. And I would just say this, man, just accept his apology.
Yeah.
He's a 22-year-old.
Yeah.
But
a few things
yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
We accept his apology, absolutely. Don't make a bigger deal of it than it is. But there's some things that are just realities, though. I think a social media world allows 22-year-olds to still function like they're 16, 15 years old. I mean, a lot of people when they're 22, they're already married, had their careers, and they're, starting their families. So I think he needs to act like an adult. And second thing that stuck out to me about it was he's claimed Christ. Like he's claimed to
Right.
be a believer. So
That's
I'm
right.
guessing maybe he just needs to be discipled. And in his world, that can be hard sometimes to actually have someone who sits down and walks you through things and corrects you and, correct, rebuke, and encourage, as the scriptures say. That's just my guess. Is he needs to be discipled. So good for him for apologizing. And in the moment, he showed his rear end, to use that old expression. And, hopefully that's a thing of the past and he builds from it. I think he probably just needs to be discipled because he claims Christ. He claims to be a believer. So I'd love to see him get discipled if he's not
Yeah.
already. I don't want to. This is my guess.
And that's the thing too. Look, if you guys look back, listeners, if you look back, first of all, you've probably never been in quite that big a moment. Most of us haven't been. But at things you did at that age, if you either didn't have social media or didn't get them posted to social media, you're probably glad they weren't. Either there was no ability for it to go to social media or it somehow didn't go to social media. You're probably glad about that. I know I am. There are things
We have some breaking news on the podcast. Pete Thamel, who I trust his reporting, just posted
from
that
ESPN.
DJ Lagway has officially entered the transfer portal. Former number one recruit in the nation.
Well, he'll find a place because here's the thing: when you have the obvious talent of a quarterback like DJ Lagway, who has all sorts of measurable skills, right? I don't think he throws the ball. I don't think he's not a precision passer, and hasn't been able to sort of master that part of the game. But when you have those kind of measurable skills, there's always the next guy who says, I can develop you. That even happens at the next level. guys are like, well, I don't think he got coached as well as he could have. And sometimes they're right. And so we'll coach him up. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So, obviously wish him well. And with the coaching change and just the way the season went, I think DJ Lagway wants a fresh start. So he'll move on from Florida and we'll see where he goes. So, all right, real quick, Army Navy, America's game. I contend it's the best game. And I thought that for a long time. I have always just enjoyed it. It's so much different, right, than the rest of college football in a lot of ways. I love the fact that it stands alone by itself on the Saturday after the conference championship games, sort of in this, obviously there was a bowl game being played later that night, but usually there isn't or there hasn't been. And then last year, my son George and I, he's an Air Force officer, young Air Force officer, we got to go to Army Navy, the 125th edition. It was played in DC. And so this year it's in Baltimore, the 126th edition, a tremendous game won by Navy. They always seem to deliver, but I just think that the actual spectacle of what the game is and what it represents and who the people are who are playing is why I think it's the best game, the best rivalry, frankly.
Oh yeah, and the history of it, of course. I love the pageantry. I mean, the president of the United States being at the 50-yard line for the coin toss was just neat, and I thought the referee did a great job of kind of owning the moment when he's on the microphone. He's not trained in that, like on the microphone.
Right.
I thought that was really great, and I posted. I said, I love the ovation for Trump and the referee. I said that's how the Army Navy game should always be. Let's have the president of the United States out there on the 50-yard line every year, no matter who it is. Let's make it about celebrating America, celebrating the great game of college football. And I know it's cliche to say that in rivalry games, you throw the records out the window. And that's sometimes true. Like, that's not true right now in Indiana, Purdue. Like it's
Right.
sometimes true. But this one, it's always true. I mean, like Army last year wins the American. And then next week, it's beat by Navy. Navy had one of their best seasons ever this year, statistically and record-wise. And here you go. Army could have won the game. Yeah, so that is like the ultimate throw the records out the window game. Like, it really is that every year, and it's great.
Yeah, no, it really is. Look, in the world of NIL, in the world of transfer portal, all of those kinds of things, this stands out even more than it ever always has and then also no NIL, no NFL usually, right? And it's a bunch of future, very soon to be soldiers and sailors. And so it's so very, very good. And man, it was a bucket list thing for me to be able to do.
Awesome.
And I tweeted this Saturday. I got to, just in the course of the career that I had, a lot of things that people would call bucket list things are just things I did as a job. And I'm grateful for that. It was a ton of fun. Never got to Army Navy. That is like the top thing, of all those things. Maybe it's not the top, but it's one of the very top things that I've ever been able to do in American sports is to go see that game. And so I would just encourage you.
Category. I feel like it's a separate category. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's like when you rank college football rivalries, it's almost like, okay, Army Navy's separate. Who else? It's just like its own separate thing.
That's right.
It's its own phenomena. It's what a neat thing. That's so cool.
Right.
You guys got to go.
Real quick, but before we record another podcast, we will have played the first round of the college football playoffs. So let's take a quick look. James Madison is in as the 12 seed, facing the 5 seed Oregon at Autzen Stadium. And Tulane is facing Ole Miss in Oxford. And I know we really want to break those games down. Actually, I don't want to break those games down because I think I know how Oregon James Madison's going to go. I suspect, even though there's some intrigue around Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin's departure, that we probably have a feel for how Ole Miss will beat Tulane. Maybe it won't be, the biggest blowout in the world. Maybe it will be. And if you disagree, that's cool too. We can talk about that. But there are 2 games, one of which you're going to attend, which is the 7-10 matchup. Number 7, Texas A&M hosting Miami on Saturday. And then Friday night to kick off the playoff, the 8-9 game, Oklahoma, the 8 seed, hosting Alabama in a rematch of a game a month ago that Oklahoma won by 2 points in Tuscaloosa. So let's talk about who you think's going to win those 4 first-round games. And I think we know maybe who's going to win the games against the group of 6 teams.
Yeah, well, so Ole Miss, I think a deciding factor for them in terms of not having the effect that other teams do without coaches during the playoffs is the guy that's going to be their head coach is now their coach.
Right.
So there's instant stability there. He's not looking over his shoulder. He's going to be the guy, bring it with Goldie being the head coach. You have James Madison's coach is already coaching for UCLA, and Tulane's coach is already coaching for Florida. That just never really works out that well, in my opinion. Maybe for a hot minute, but against a team with that much superior talent, and Chesney's gone. I think that those are going to be emotional and close the first couple possessions. And then I think Oregon's going to be way too much for JMU. I think Tulane is a little more of a fight. I mean, they already played Ole Miss, but Ole Miss is significantly better than they are. So the games that actually are interesting will be. I'll watch all of them in the playoffs. But I don't love a rematch being the first game, first round. I don't love that with that being the pairing, but it is what it is. So I think Alabama goes to Norman and wins.
Mm-hmm.
And then Miami, Texas
Okay.
A&M, I just cannot get a feel for that game. There's so many factors. Beck's got to play well. I mean, Beck has got to. He cannot lay an egg, in that environment. And then Bain and Mesidor, the ends have to contain Reed, and he's special. He's athletic. I think it's gonna the fight the matchup to look at is going to be Texas A&M's offensive line versus Miami's D line. I think that's going to be an interesting matchup there. And I think if all things are equal, which I think they are in that game, I think you go with the home team. In a prediction, I think that, and that's going to be as home game as it gets. They only gave Miami 3,500 tickets. There were 20,000 requests for tickets. We only got 3,500. So I feel fortunate to be going with my boys. Yeah.
Well, let me just say that I can't disagree with your analysis of either one of those things. One question I have with Texas A&M is they beat Notre Dame at the start of the year, and then they played nobody. It's not their fault because that's the way the SEC schedule fell for them until they went to Austin to face their rival, the Longhorns, and the Longhorns controlled that football game. It's the last time we saw them out there, and so what are we going to see from Texas A&M now with the third really good team they're going to play this season in Miami? And I don't know the answer to that. I suspect that in a pick 'em type of game that I would go with the home team too. I think A&M's really good. It's just that we didn't really know all season long. We were hanging our hats on the Notre Dame win in Ann Arbor, which is a great win. And then
George Schroeder, I cannot believe you would say out loud that somebody can play an SEC schedule and it not be
come on,
tough.
man. Here we go. No, Todd knows. Todd knows. He just knows that the Georgia Bulldogs only ever play the toughest schedules. Just ask him. No, and he's actually not wrong right now, but I mean, and I know you're kidding, but the imbalanced schedules that can happen and are going to inevitably happen in these big conferences with 16 teams in the SEC and 18 in the Big Ten, not to go down a rabbit trail, but that's one of the problems right now with college football is you can end up building a record and a resume that might reflect how good you are, but it might not based on who you come up against. And because you're not playing the same teams as somebody else in your own league is playing. So I just don't know how good Texas A&M actually is. I suspect they're really good, but the last time we saw them, they got handled by a Texas team that is talented but has been up and really down all year. A very meteoric team. And so how good are they? I don't know. So I guess I'll pick A&M, but I don't have a good feel for them. I don't have an issue with your analysis of Alabama, Oklahoma. I think those teams were very close. Oklahoma benefited from 3 turnovers, although you can also say Oklahoma created 3 turnovers.
I don't think that happens again. I think Simpson's locked in.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. Now they won on the road and now they play at home, talking about Oklahoma. So there is that. The thing that I think is the question that I have no questions about Oklahoma's defense. The question that I have is, can Oklahoma not only move the football but score touchdowns? And the answer over the last half of the season has been essentially no. Since Mateer returned from the thumb injury, they've been unable to score very many points. And so they've leaned heavily, almost completely on their defense. And while I think defenses win championships, you've got to have an offense. And they're the exact opposite almost of those old Lincoln Riley teams at Oklahoma that would roll in with the best offense but couldn't stop anybody. These guys, it's like the exact opposite. So
if you punted once, you were going to lose. If you were Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how to pick that game. If you want to reverse it, I got no issues with that. I'll go with the home team. I'll go with 2 home teams, and we'll just see what happens. But so, and then that'll forward us on into the playoffs. So, hey, let's take a quick break, and then let's take just a brief moment to talk about just some of the things that make Christmas special. I want to talk about on the other side of this break. I want to talk real quick about finding peace at Christmas. So we'll be right back with the second half of Gridiron and the Gospel, a Faith and College Football podcast. Welcome back. Second half of Gridiron and the Gospel of Faith and College Football podcast. I'm George Schroeder. He's Dean and Sarah. We want to talk about our faith in Christ on this half. And we talked a little bit about it on the first half, but in this half, especially because it's the Christmas season, and I know your podcast habits get interrupted this time of year, I want to take the opportunity just to talk about one of the big themes that we find at Christmas time all over our culture, but I don't believe it's always the way it's intended at Christmas time. And so, first of all, I'm talking, of course, about desserts. Desserts, right? You want to talk about Christmas being
Christmas cookies, icing. I want all of it.
Yeah, well, you're that guy, right? And I understand that. I find Christmas to be a time of landmines, and many of us do, right? Well, for me, it's because of all the desserts that get offered around. It's hard. It's hard not to do that. And so I saw this. Somebody posted this the other day, and I never really thought about it. Now I can't unsee it. You know what you get when you spell desserts backwards?
I do not.
Stressed. And so I think two things. One, we come to Christmas and we are looking for something to de-stress with. And I think we find our comfort in the desserts. That's one of the ways we're trying to slow down, rest, all those things you find at Christmas to achieve peace. And we're trying to figure out a way to beat the stress. I'm just going to give you one quick thing. Y'all who are trying to kill your stress with desserts, it's going to create more stress. And when we do a podcast in January, you're going to be listening to it in one of your 2 or 3 days at the gym before your resolution ends. So don't create more stress by overeating all those wonderful desserts. But peace is the theme I want to talk about, right? We think about, for those of you guys who are of a certain age, you think about a Charlie Brown Christmas where like Linus recites the Christmas story, or at least the portion of it where the angels came to the shepherds outside Bethlehem. And most of us know this, right? And the angel says, what does the angel say in the old King James Version? And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host praising God and saying, glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. And we want that peace. But there's some other translations that get at this, the actual language better of what the angel said. Glory to God in the highest heaven, and peace on earth to people he favors, or among people with whom he is pleased. And I think it's really...
Imagine being those shepherds and hearing that.
Well, first of all, I'd want to know, I would sort of feel like maybe he's potentially pleased with me because look at all these angels coming to tell me this. But that's the question, is how do you understand that peace?
Yeah.
What do you think that means? And that'd be the question I think people ought to ask at Christmas time. So, Dean, what's your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, he's pleased with us in Christ, right? And that peace is only going to be found. We're talking about Sherrone Moore earlier. That's available to him. It's available to him. He can have peace.
Right now.
Yeah, absolutely. There's grace for him, and there's repentance for him, and there's new life for him. There's earthly consequences, but God's not going to hold his sin over him if he'll trust in Christ, because Jesus has dealt with his sin. So I think the way peace happens is this happens in cultural Christianity that hurts us from seeing it, is the baby has to move out of the manger. How many people are totally fine with like the manger as like an accessory to the holiday celebration? It's just kind of part of the sentimentality. Christmas tree, snowmen decorations, a village with lights, and the manger, right? And that baby was born because he was going to grow up and live a perfect life that we failed to live, die a death that we deserve. He's the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. That sacrificial system throughout the Old Testament, he is the fulfillment, not just the fulfillment, he was the one all of it was pointing to. He's the anticipation, and he rose from the grave. And then one day he will come back again to make all things new after he ascended to heaven. So peace is found in the one that has conquered it all. But you're never going to find that peace if he just stays in the manger and you love Jesus, the baby, but don't actually receive Jesus, the Savior. And
that's right.
That's my hope for everybody at Christmas time. And I'm all for all the Christmas things. You're not going to hear me ho-hum commercialism at Christmas. I love all of it. But I think hopefully it enhances our celebration of Christ and what we're excited about more than anything. And I think that can be true for Christians. I think believers can go all in on all the fun Christmas things and make it a celebration of who Jesus is. I told our church on Sunday, I actually preached that text from Luke 2. And I said, one of the best things we can do in response to this text is join the angels and the shepherds in the celebration. Like, join them in that. Imagine the shepherds out in field and you're keeping watch over your flock by night. You're raising these sheep. They're going to be used to the sacrificial system. Because of that, you're deemed as unclean. You can't even participate in the system that you're helping continue. And all of a sudden the skies open up and they tell you God has given you favor. Right now, there's a baby that's been born for you. I mean, imagine that moment. You can have peace with God.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So my hope for all our listeners is may your football team win. As my friend Cody Gibson says, may all your favorite bands stay together. And may you actually understand what it means to have peace with God that only comes through Christ. And it's been provided for us in the Christmas story.
Dropping the Cody Gibson reference to our friend at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. So appreciate that. Real quick, I would just say this. Don't settle for a false peace, for something like a truce or détente or whatever it is. It's the peace we're talking about is not when your Alabama uncle comes over and at Christmas dinner, he doesn't talk about the Iron Bowl and you're an Auburn fan. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about peace with God. And we need peace with God because we are naturally at war with him. We have rebelled against him. We are rebelling against him if we're not in Christ. And so that's why Christ came, as you explained, is to allow us to be reconciled to God. And it's not just this absence of conflict or this temporary truce. It's peace and restoration and reconciliation with God. And that ultimately is what we all peace with God, right? That's what God with us means. It means we can have peace with him. You've heard the phrase, no Jesus means no peace. But if you know Jesus, you know real peace. And so that's my prayer for each of our listeners is that you would find real, deep, lasting peace that passes all understanding. It's found only in Christ. And I'd love to talk with you about that. Dean would love to talk with you about that. You can find me or him on Twitter at George Schroeder, at Dean Insera, or at Gridiron_Gospel. You can reach out to us at gridirongospelpod@gmail.com. We'd love to talk more with you about that. We'll talk football, but we would love to talk. I promise you, we would love to talk about Christ. So gridirongospelpod@gmail.com. So be sure to rate, review, and subscribe in your favorite podcast apps. We're on all the major platforms. You can find us on YouTube. Some of you already have, and you're not quite sure that you want to do it again. But hey, check us out. You'll enjoy it. And then tune in here in a few days. We're going to have a little bit different schedule, but tune in a few days, and we'll probably be talking about the first round of the college football playoff on another edition of Gridiron and the Gospel, a faith and college football podcast.
Go Canes.